evening, good evening, good evening. I'm going to start with this in the stand. Hello. So what I want to talk about tonight does have a little bit to do with what I wrote about in my book. And part of the reason Inner Critic, Inner Success was so meaningful to me is because I have tons of inner critics. So I sort of feel like this, sensei master about inner critic stuff. And as I would go out in the world and I would coach, and it wouldn't matter who I would coach. It could be a VP at some big name company, or it could be somebody at a startup. We would start saying, okay, what are your goals around coaching? What does success look like to you? And I'm not okay with that success story that says, well, I'd like to be an agile leader with good customer satisfaction. I'm like, boring. Okay, no, what is success? Like, what gets you excited? But when you try to work on getting that out of people, what comes up? The fears, the doubts, the inner critics. And so I felt better because I was like, oh, good, it's not just me. But I saw this as a way to think about how our inner critics and what we really care about seem to be related to each other. Not always. I mean, there are some inner critics that you can just kick to the corner. But I actually found that the more we dove into the emotions, the vulnerability, the fears, the more we got to some rich stuff. The more we got to what really matters underneath, which led us back to what success really means to folks. And so I had done this as a speech about 5 years ago, managing the inner critic and committee, and I spoke at Microsoft Women's Conference. And I had no idea the response it would get, but it had a lot of people showed up at that conference session. And afterwards, somebody said, well, you need to write a book. And I was like, I'm not a writer. Inner critic, hello. It took me about 4 years, and I can honestly say I'm not a writer. I am, thank God there's lots of people in the world, and books get published through a tribe. But what I want to do in the world is I want to coach people, I want to do workshops, I want to talk to people, I want to have this conversation, this connectedness with people about not only what we fear, but what makes us feel incredible. And I think those things are related to each other. So instead of really trying to deflect and avoid the inner critic, I'm going to ask you to do something different with it. I'm going to ask you to dive down deep into your inner critic. Don't get up and run out the door. But I think there's some real wisdom in here. And it doesn't get answered in one night in a 15-minute keynote. It doesn't get answered like this. Chantal said, this takes work. This is life work. If you want the quick silver bullet answer, like 5 steps to be the size 8U for this summer, I don't have it, honey. I don't have it. If I did, I'd be making tons of money. But I don't have that. What I do have is some hard-fought wisdom around this from my own experiences and from hundreds of people that I've been able to coach. Both men and women, I often get a question that says, well, do men experience inner critics? What do you think? Oh, yeah. Yeah, sister, they do. It's different language, but tonight I want to talk about your language. There's one specific thing in the book I want to talk about tonight, and it's called The Divine Flaw. And I actually chose it thinking about Chantal because when we talked over a year ago and I told her about this concept, she was like, that's what you got to title the book. And I didn't follow her advice, and we'll see what happens. But tonight I wanted to talk about the divine flaw. In literature, there's the tragic flaw, right? What is that? What's tragic flaw? The thing that trips you up. It's the flaw in the main character that leads to their ultimate downfall. I hope I got that right. My best friend's an English teacher. But I really like to think about this as the divine flaw. I don't want a tragic flaw, frankly. That's just setting me up for failure. But the reason I found out about divine flaw is, I'll start out and I'll tell you a little bit of story for where this came from. I was in grad school. I used to work in software, and I decided to quit making great money, spend all my savings, go back to school and try a business I didn't know I would succeed at. Super smart. Had a few inner critics going on during that time. And we had one of our curriculums was to do a design and facilitation. And it was great because we could do any topic around diversity. And I'm like, sweet! Because diversity is one of my favorite topics. So I went to work, man. I did the PowerPoint, I had little props, I made little diversity dollars. I mean, I worked on it, I changed the PowerPoint, I worked on the slides, and then I delivered it. And it was okay. But you see, one of my inner critics is perfectionist. So okay just doesn't cut it in my world. Okay is a complete fail. I was devastated. It tore me up inside because I'd put so much time into this thing. Well, I'm talking to my professor, Pam Johnson. Pardon me, I'm going to have to take some water every now and then because, of course, when you have a speaking gig, you get a cold 3 days before, right? So good. So I was talking to Pam Johnson, and she said, okay, Stace. I was like, she's like, you did get a passing grade. And I'm like, whatever. Okay. Right? Does anybody relate to that? Anybody? Show of hands. Make me feel better here. Thank you. That's nice. She said, okay, so what's the deal? Why does it matter to you so much that you didn't do this perfectly? This was over a long conversation, and I said, I just care about diversity. It matters to me. And she said, well, why does it matter to you so much? And she kept saying, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? And we dug and we dug and we dug deeper. And what we get to is what I didn't know then, which is one of my deeply held values around belonging. I want to belong. I want everybody to feel like they belong somewhere. And I know there's people who don't. So it's important to me to get that message across. And she said, yep, that's your divine flaw. So this was Pam's, by the way. She said, your flaw is that you will work on it so hard that you will overwork it. That's what I did. I overworked the presentation. But your divinity is that you care so much about this message getting out there. It's your divine flaw. She said, I could help you. I could help you get rid of these perfectionist tendencies. I'm like, sweet, I'm there. What do I do? She's like, you have to give up caring so much about people belonging. No deal. I can't do it. It's just in me. It's in me. I hated writing the whole time. It's in me. I've got to put this message out there. I have to. So everybody has in them a divine flaw. And that's one of the things I wanted you to think about tonight. When your inner critic starts raging, I list 6 inner critics in the book. The perfectionist is one of them. We've covered that. The do-it-all driver, who doesn't have to do things perfectly, but they do have to do all of them. Any drivers in the crowd? All right. Right. The fake or fraud, meaning they're going to find out sooner or later, I don't know what I'm doing. Anyone? I got a little bit of that tonight. The pleaser, which means I've got to make sure everybody likes me, I've got to do it just right, and then things will be good in the world. Pleasers, feel free. We're loud and proud. We're all connected here. The comparer, which is, it doesn't matter how cute my shoes are. Hello? Patent red leather boots. Somebody's got some cuter shoes in here. Somebody. Yep, Sarah Yao. You and your damn shoes. That's the comparer. And the last one is called the saboteur. I sort of call that the jack of all trades. Anything that's going right, I'm going to find a way to bring it down. Those are the 6 classic critics that I see appear. How many of you, I just want us to feel good and loving in here, good and compassionate. How many of you have 3 or more of those critics? Let's hear it. That's kind of quiet. How many of you have 3 or more of those critics? Yes, okay. Here's the good news. The good news is, on the other side of those critics, if you think about a nasty message that's been following you around lately, I know one of the cards said, what's juicy in your life? Sometimes what's juicy is those fears and doubts. Underneath it, there's something divine about you. And to get there, you might have to ask your friends about it. You might have to ask yourself, why? What is it? I have a client that I work with. What we came to for her is her divine flaw is, I want to have beautiful impact. She is so passionate about doing beautiful work, not just okay work, beautiful work, that she sometimes pisses off her colleagues. And that bothers her. She has a pleaser critic inside of her. No, I'm not saying this gives her a get out of jail free card. You can just be as passionate as you want, piss anybody off. But instead of the negative, people don't like me, I push people away, we're channeling it. We want to know, where does that come from? What's beautiful about you? So we take it from negative to positive. This is one of my favorite inner critic tools. The last example I want to give is about me, and it's about what's emerging in me lately, not what we talked about upstairs. Let me just do this one more time. The other thing that can come up with a divine flaw is something inside of you that wants to come out. Identity. We talked a lot about identity upstairs. In the last couple of years, as I've put the book out and I've gone through some identity exercises with a group called Braid Creative, you know, I'm putting myself out there. I'm putting myself out there in a book form, in a website form, blog more, write more. Holy crap, really? And the inner critics that started to come up were things from my family. I could hear my father in the background. My family grew up in a small town. And the statement was, better not get too big for your britches. Oh, I don't know. Mighty proud of yourself, aren't you? And that was the inner critic in my head. But the challenge I had to be called to is, I am bigger. I do have an important message. I can't let that inner critic win. I cannot do it, because inside of me, there's something divine, and it's in a message that I want to get out there. And what they helped me realize in the divinity, and I loved this, was there's a preacher rocker in me. They made me figure out, who would you relate it to? First person that came to my mind, Beyonce. Beyonce, Sasha Fierce, she has this persona out there. She gets out there. She doesn't care what her body looks like. In fact, she does care what her body looks like. It looks fabulous. She goes out on stage and puts on a performance. She has a message. I'm a preacher rocker, and I have a message like Macklemore. I want people to belong. And I am a rocker. Yes, I graduated high school in 1987. Woo! I can still do big hair. 3 weeks ago, this was a faux hawk. But this is the thing. When I come to things like for tonight, I get scared to get up here and speak. Don't get me wrong. I get scared. I get nervous. Of course I do. I have inner critics running through my head. But here's what I remember. Why do you get up on stage? Why do you do this? Why do you put your message out there when inside your head it might be going, you're too big, you're too big, you're too big? You're damn right I'm too big. I want you to feel your divine flaw. I want you, the next time that inner critic comes in and has some nasty-ass message for you, I want you to dig underneath it. Don't avoid it. Dig underneath it. Why does this matter to you? What value, what superpower, what identity is dying to come out? And shift. And know that that inner critic's there for a reason. It's a reason to remind you why you're divine. Don't let it stop you.